Morning, this is Aurelio Paredes Bautista, and I'm sitting in a sunny place within the confines of my compound while my neighbor is doing some repair work in the house. I shall be talking about COVID-19, my thoughts about it, my observation, and my interpretation of the graphs made by the WHO. First, we shall be talking about the global situation. If you look at the graph, you will see that this begins in April 2020 and ends in August 2021. Well, exactly about August 11. This is the infection. And this below, using the same dates, are the deaths. So, if you divide the number of deaths by the number of infections, you will see that the result is 0.021. This means 21 died per 1,000 all over the world due to the COVID situation. To answer the question, does the vaccine work? You will see here the data from WHO about the United States of America from April 2020 to August. You will see here the portion where the COVID went down, but it went up again. But that's the time when the vaccination in America is happening. So even though it went up, the deaths still go down, meaning the vaccines work. That's for the United States of America. Now, for the United Kingdom, you see here the vaccine is given here, and there is no death when it was given, see? And the COVID went up again, but the deaths remain very low. That is for the United Kingdom data. Now, let us go to France. France here, okay? Vaccination here. The COVID case went up, but the deaths still continue to go down. So vaccines work in US, UK, and France. In Japan, see, they have not given much vaccination, but still the deaths go down while the COVID went up. See? This is the infection, this is the death. That's for Japan, okay? For Germany, same thing. The deaths went down. Even though there's a little bit of an increase in the COVID. This is for Korea. The COVID still goes up, but the deaths go down. That is because of the vaccination. Israel. See? Israel here. And the COVID cases went up, but see, because of the vaccination, it went down. So, we can conclude that the vaccines work from the data that I have shown you. To answer the question whether the effect of COVID for all countries is the same, I am showing you a map from World Atlas by Signet Hammond. It shows the whole world and the Tropic of Cancer, the line here, Tropic of Cancer, and the Tropic of Capricorn line here. You will see that many of the countries in the ASEAN are here, which we call the tropics. Temperate zone, tropics, temperate zone. Many of the people are in the northern hemisphere. And so, very few are here, 70% here, and 30% live below the equator. Okay, so now I shall show you two examples which will show you that the effect of COVID is not the same for those in the tropics and those in the temperate countries. I am showing you America. Most of the American land is in the temperate zone, except for Hawaii and Guam. You can see there are plenty of those infected, and the deaths are more, although it is 0.017, meaning 17 per 1,000 died because of the COVID. It was taken when we divide the deaths by the number of infections here. But America has over 300 million in population. And if you compare this with this, about 10% of the population were infected. Okay? Now I am showing you the Philippine data. Okay? Where 1,667,714 were infected and about 30,000 died from the start of the COVID up to the present. And still, the rate of death divided by the infection is 0.017. Same in America. But the Philippines has over 100 million in population and only about 1%. 1%, you can say 1.6%. They are the only ones infected. While in America, it's 10%. So, you can see that the location of the country will tell you how many people will be infected. Now I shall show you the nations in the tropics. These are the members of the ASEAN. First is the Lao People's Democratic Republic, Laos. No COVID in 2020, and in 2021 it has COVID here. So, you can see that very little infection, very few deaths. That is the characteristic of the COVID in the tropical countries of ASEAN. Cambodia, the same. Except that during 2021, world travel reached Cambodia. And so, they have infections, and you can see that they probably have not received their vaccination. So the death is going up. But you can see that it is not as high as in the temperate countries. Only 1,614 dead. Vietnam. Okay, so 2020, none. 2021, well, they have it. And they have about 5,000 dead. Very few compared to countries in the temperate countries of the north. Malaysia. Malaysia is so much exposed to the countries of the West. So they had the COVID earlier than most of the countries like Laos, Cambodia, and others. So it appears that they have not yet fully vaccinated their people. It is still going up, the infection, the death is still going up. So, but if you compare it with the Philippines, our number of people is more than them, and we probably just measure up just the same. Malaysia and the Philippines are almost the same. Thailand has better performance. I'm not saying better because they have better doctors, but because they're in the tropics and they were not affected so much in 2020. It's only because of the world travel that they had it. And you can see they are not probably vaccinated yet. They had 6,942 as of August 11. Myanmar, see, world travel is probably the culprit. 12,667. I think this is higher than the Philippine ratio because they have fewer people than the Philippines. But still, the effect on the tropical countries is not the same as those in the temperate. Singapore, vaccination, see, goes up, but you can see here, 4 to 1. So, it's only 5. Here, 5. So, the graph does not show a true picture because they used a bigger scale. Unlike here, they use a smaller scale. So, they're doing better because of the vaccination. Indonesia, you see, here in 2020, they're not so much affected. But when the people go to Indonesia, that's the spread, beginning of the spread of the COVID. And they're vaccinating. But it appears that they have to give more efforts. Their record is a little bit higher than the Philippines because their population is more than 3 times. Oh, no, I'm wrong. It's 2.7 times more than the Philippines. That's their population. But you see, we have only 30,000, they have 113. This is, I think, a bad record for country in the tropics. I shall come back to you and explain this using my own interpretation. And this is the Philippines. See? And we could have erased here the COVID, except that the overseas Filipino workers were coming home. They kept coming home. And so, because of world travel, the COVID went into the Philippines again. And so, we have to grapple with this problem all over again. I am showing you the graphs about the Indonesia situation. See, they have COVID, they vaccinated here, and yet the deaths still go up. And I will introduce to you my own opinion about this. They have a very high figure compared to the Philippines, and very high figure compared to all the members of ASEAN. To me, it is not much of a puzzle because I can explain it. You see, Indonesia before had been practicing deforestation. No less than Harrison Ford criticized Indonesia about that because they were trying to cut down the trees in the timberlands so that they can make the land productive for human purposes, in the sense that they can change the trees in the area from tall trees to palm trees, where they can make money. And that's very bad, because when you remove the habitation of those animals living in the area, you necessarily make them move somewhere or they die. And when the people come in, it is like the white men coming to the land of the American Indians. They brought the disease with them. They brought the viruses. And when the people, the new settlers of the denuded land in Indonesia went in, they were able to catch all the viruses, and that's implanted in them. And when the time comes that is favorable to the virus, they will be affected. I can say the same for Brazil. So, you can see that Brazil is also a victim of the same thing that happened in Indonesia. Or shall we call them victims? Or they did it in the first place, so that what they did came back to them. And Chile, here, infections here. And Peru, and Mexico, were the bystanders who were affected by deforestations in Brazil. And so, they did not probably deserve it, but still, they got the COVID. Showed you how living in the tropics will result in lower infections than in temperate countries. I showed you the results in America. I showed you the results in the Philippines. The infections in America is about 10%. In the Philippines, it's only 1%. That is because we have the benefit of the direct sunlight, and the temperate countries have oblique light. I shall now explain when and why we get the benefit. But first, let me show you a map. Well, not exactly a map, but a representation showing the equator here. And in the north, that is the Tropic of Cancer. And in the south, this is the Tropic of Capricorn. Let's start with December 22, when the sunlight is directly over a portion of Australia. That's December 22, and it is very cold in the north, but very hot here. Okay? So, when March 22 comes, the sun is hitting the equator here. So, we have equal day and equal night. That's the meaning of equinox. Okay? So, the sunlight keeps coming up because there is a tilt of 23 1/3 degrees in our axis. So, by May 5, it's over Manila. It hits the Philippines twice. It hits Manila once in this particular situation and goes to the Tropic of Cancer somewhere over Taiwan. And it comes back. The sunlight comes back. And by August 11, it's over Manila again. So the sunlight, direct sunlight is hitting twice Manila, May 5 and August 11, and it comes back to the equator on September 22 and comes back to the Tropic of Capricorn on December 22 again. This creates the season. But you can see the tropics, the tropical countries are hit twice, but not even once does the direct sunlight hit the temperate countries of the north and the south. Now I'm showing you a representation of the Sun, Mercury, Venus, and Earth. And they are all in the plane called the ecliptic. The Sun rotates in its axis, and the planets revolve around the Sun. But they never go anywhere outside of the ecliptic. You can think of the ecliptic as a map, and everything is rolling on that particular map. So, okay? Now, I am showing you the ecliptic, and this is the Earth, and that is the Moon. But the Moon revolves around the Earth in a way that is not exactly on the ecliptic, because if the Moon is on the ecliptic, we will have twice, no, not twice, but one eclipse every month. But because it is not in the ecliptic, it is tilted at 5.1 degrees. So it passes here on the ecliptic at a particular date, and here again after 15 days or 14 days during the month. So the Moon is passing over the ecliptic twice every month, and it results in a full moon. That's the sun, the earth, and when the moon is here, that's a full moon, because the rays of the sun is reflected by the moon back to the earth during the night. While here, when the sun is here, the earth is there and the moon is here, the moon blocks the sunlight during the night. So, that is where the sustenance of the sun is blocked by the moon. Now, I probably did not explain it much, but I prepared something to prevent myself from making mistakes, because I am sometimes forgetful. The earth has a tilt of 23 1/3 degrees on its axis, which creates the seasons, depending on where the direct sunlight is touching the earth. The sunlight passes twice on the tropical countries during the year, and not even once on the tropical countries. The sun sustains life on earth. Without the sun, we are all dead, and the tropics get more light. The moon blocks most of the sustenance of the sun during a night where there is a new moon. The moon reflects the sustenance of the sun during the night where there is a full moon. This is telling you when we have the benefits. And the why is because of the tilt of the axis, which creates our seasons and which gives direct sunlight and oblique sunlight to countries on the earth. I shall show you a brief summary of how I see the COVID-19 happening in the Philippines. During my previous post in my YouTube, I showed you how I predicted how the surge of the COVID-19 would end during the start of the COVID-19 pandemic in the Philippines. Now here, I give you the scale which I use for the dead, for the recovered, and for the infected, using the same scale, so that my graph will be more understandable. And here I showed you the dates, including the phases of the moon. And I started somewhere around March 26. But President Duterte imposed the lockdown on March 15, when there were about 55,000 dead all over the world. And so, we see here the line representing the infections. And the infection by April is about 5,430 cases. So we see an infection going up almost at the same slope. And I figured out, I made a graph of how I can present the dead. And it was like that. And the healed, it was like that. But on April 15, there was a crossover between these two lines, the healed and the dead. Okay, so that's when I projected this line and I arrived at a slope like this, a side of a triangle. And so from here to there, I measured the distance from here to there to here on this portion, and I made an isosceles triangle. Isosceles now. Okay? Now, so from there, I made a line here, the side of a triangle, and from there, I found that the full moon, the new moon, the first quarter and the last quarter can influence the result of the COVID-19 in the Philippines. So, by May 5, when there was a full moon, we have almost licked the COVID-19. In fact, a few weeks later, Secretary Duque was saying, we have licked the COVID-19, but because of the people coming back from elsewhere, because we have 3,000 overseas Filipino workers, they brought the COVID-19 again to the Philippines. If we were only an island by ourselves, without people living and without people coming in, we would have licked the pandemic right then. But that's not so. So, I'm only presenting to you a slope like that. And you can see the dead is continuing like a line. So it's controlled when, especially when this particular slope and this slope are parallel. And you see this has gone up abruptly. In engineering, it's called an asymptote. So that what we were doing in the Philippines at the time was very effective. Plus, we were aided by the Lord, because the Lord gave us the phases of the moon, and we were then at the point when the sun was touching the Philippines. Now I shall show you a tabulation of the COVID data, showing you the figures during the several phases of the moon. Okay? So, before I introduce that, I would say that these are the dates when the sun was striking the Philippines. Okay? Beginning in April up to September. And you can see that the infected goes like this. Infected 6,981, the dead was 462, and our rate was 0.066, when the world average was 0.021. So, we were high at that point, but only 462 dead. And you can see that it went down 0.066, 0.062, 0.046, 0.038, 0.029. We were becoming acquainted with our work in the hospital and taking care of the sick, and we were gaining the experience. This is the learning curve. And we went down to 0.013. lower than the world figure of 0.021 dead per thousand. We were only 13 dead per thousand, while the world figure was 21 dead per thousand. So we already had it here. But, as you can see here, the sun was leaving us. By October, the sun was already in the southern hemisphere, and it was bad for us. So we went back to 0.017. We went up again. 018, 018, 019, 019. Look at the dates here. And the phases of the moon. So, 019, 020, 0210. See, we were doing bad here, not because we were poor health workers, but because the phases of the moon and the direct sunlight was not favorable to us. The sunlight was in the southern hemisphere. But as soon as it comes back to the northern hemisphere, like here, comes back to the northern hemisphere, so it goes down again. 018, 017, 016. See, we were lower than the world figure of 0.021 because we were being hit by the direct sunlight, and even the phases of the moon would not hurt us. You see, I am telling you this because you have to consider the phases of the moon and the position of the direct sunlight. You probably think it is superstition, but please listen to me, because I have given this my effort in order to give better protection for our people. Now, I shall give you a summary of what I say. I showed you how direct sunlight affected the Philippines favorably while it hit the northern hemisphere, and adversely when the sun hit the southern hemisphere. I showed you how the new moon was destructive when the sunlight was in the southern hemisphere. The effect of the new moon was cancelled when the Philippines had direct sunlight. I have already shown it to you. I showed you the circumstances beneficial and inimical to the Philippines. The direct sunlight benefits us. The oblique sunlight is inimical to the temperate countries. Let us end this particular session by giving you the advice. Wear your face mask and shield. Wash hands frequently. Keep a safe distance. Take vitamin C to make your immune system effective. Obey the government. They're doing everything in order to protect us. This is Aurelio Paredes Bautista. See you again. I should like to make an erratum with what I say here. I said, not even once on the tropical countries, when I meant not even once on the temperate countries. This is Aurelio Paredes Bautista. I'm sorry for the mistake.